Welcome back to another week of the Multifaceted Athlete. This week, I have one of my very own athletes with me, and I'm so excited. We have been working together for more than a year now, and she has run multiple ultras at this point, and we're going to dive into her story because she has not always been an ultra runner. So today I have Mack Nia with me. You might know her as Mackadee on TikTok and Instagram. Mack, welcome to the show.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you for having me. I feel like I'm the self-proclaimed number one fan of the multifaceted athlete. So I'm so honored to be here today.
I know. I'm so excited that you're here. Cuz it's been a journey and I've only seen part of it. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited to hear the parts I don't know about.
Yeah, I'm excited to share. It's going to be so fun.
Yeah, cuz you've been documenting pretty much all of your journey on TikTok, right? Since the
Yeah,
pandemic at
pretty
least.
much. Yeah, pretty much from the beginning I've been documenting everything. So, yeah, it's been quite the journey.
Yeah. So I guess let's just dive right in. So, like we've mentioned a couple times, you started running in the pandemic, but I'm curious, before COVID hit, was there any time you got into running before then and it like didn't stick, or what happened around that?
Yes. So I started running during COVID through an app called Couch to 5K. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, but the time it actually stuck was the third time that I've done it. So I call myself a Couch to 5K dropout. But I did eventually graduate. But I was actually thinking about this as I was thinking about what I wanted to share on the podcast, and I was thinking how my fascination with running started a long time ago. I had always wanted to be a runner, but I it never stuck. There were always things that would happen or I would just kind of give up, but I was just always fascinated by like, my friends who could run, and I wanted to run. And I was thinking, I feel like it started back in middle school when we'd have to run the mile,
Yeah.
which I feel like everyone hated, but I'm I feel very competitive against myself, which I feel like a lot of runners can probably relate to that.
Hmm.
And I would always try and get my mile time faster. And I actually was because I'm not really that fast right now, but at all. But in middle school, I think I ran like a my fastest mile was like 7:15 or something. And
Ooh.
I know, right? If only I kept running then. But I I really wanted to my goal was I wanted to get into the mile club, which was like when you could run below a 7-minute mile, and I kept trying and I never got into it, but I that was like I feel like that's what got me kind of interested in running, is that competitive against yourself aspect of it. And then I had some friends who were going into they were going to do track and field in high school. And I wanted to do track and field, but then I learned that in our high school, you also had to do cross country. And I was like, they run like 5 to 7 miles at a time. Like, I could never do that. And I was like, if only 12-year-old Mackenzie would see where I am now.
Seriously.
Yeah, so I didn't end up running in high school, but I guess fast forward to my mid 20s, I really wanted to start running, and I heard about Couch to 5K, which is an app where it helps you from not running at all to running, being able to run a 5K in 8 weeks. And it starts off with run walk intervals and kind of slowly um, increases to the 5K distance. And I tried it twice before it stuck. And the both times I did it, it was in the gym on the treadmill, and I was going way too fast. So I just hated it so much. And the second time I did it was January 2020, and I was like, this time I'm gonna do it. And I like told all my friends about it, and was like, I'm gonna make sure I finish it this time. And same thing. I was in the gym running too fast, and I just by week 4, I was like, I hate this so much. And then what kind of got it to stick was, COVID happened, and um it was probably June. We were at like a picnic with our friends, and one of my friends was like, "Oh yeah, I started Couch to 5K, and I'm 4 weeks in." And I felt so jealous. I was like, I told all my friends about this, and now they're doing it, but I didn't. I wasn't even able to finish it. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give it one more try. And but this time I ran outside because it
Mhm.
was right when the gyms were shut down, and I went out to this like little trail, like flat trail with it was so pretty, and I didn't have like good running shoes, or I didn't have a running watch. I just had the Couch to 5K app, which tells you in your ear when to run and walk. And I just felt like that was when Mackenzie the runner was birthed. I feel like it was like a an awakening for me, because I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is actually awesome." When you're outside and just running at a pace that feels good. And I feel like a lot of times when you start new hobbies, you don't know if you're going to stick with it, and you kind of don't want to invest in the gear. But I was like, I know, like I'm a runner now. I'm going to run. And so I, immediately went and got fitted for shoes and got a watch, and that's kind of how it started. And then I finished Couch to 5K, and then kind of kept going from there. So that's kind of the how it finally stuck for me.
Yeah, I have so many questions. So first, going back to high school, what did you want your event to be in track if you didn't want to run cross country?
Well, I actually went to the middle school track meet for
Hmm.
the 400 meter.
Oh my
I
God.
know, right? I think I got like fourth place. I wish I knew what my time was, because I don't remember, but
Hmm.
yeah, I remember. I think in because it was like middle school PE, so I feel like I was probably running in like Converse, which is so funny. Like at the track meet,
Hmm.
I didn't have it. It was like you just wear like the shoes that you wear to school. It's
Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know what I would have ended up doing, but probably something like that.
So you wanted to be a sprinter.
I which is so funny now, like that I've done ultras, and I'm not that fast. It's just yeah, it's funny that had things gone differently, maybe I would have been a sprinter. Who knows?
Maybe. Yeah, the
Yeah,
400 is brutal. I've
yeah.
never run it,
I've
but
That's what I hear people say, and it's like why was that the one that stuck with me in middle school? I don't
maybe
know.
short enough that it was over fast. It's kind of like how most of us feel about the 5K now. It's like short enough to be
Yeah,
over fast, but you also run really hard.
yeah, totally.
But the 5K is not short. Just putting that out there.
No, no.
um, yeah. So then, okay, when you first tried Couch to 5K,
Mhm.
why did you choose to run in the gym versus outside?
I think that it was just like we had our gym membership, and like me and my husband would just go to the gym together, and that would be the thing that I would do. And I don't know why it never crossed my mind to just run outside instead. It just seems now it seems like duh, that's what you should have been doing. But yeah, at the time it was just kind of a practical thing, because we were already going to the gym. So I was just thinking, okay, when I'm at the gym, this is going to be the thing that I do. But yeah, and I remember my husband Puya, he was telling me like, I think you might be going a little fast. Like, maybe you should slow down. I'm like, no, this is running speed. And then as the distances got longer, or the distances that I was running got longer, and the distances I was walking were shorter, it just was not a sustainable pace for me. I don't even know how fast I was running, but yeah, I just it made it not an enjoyable experience.
I can imagine. Yeah, I was going to ask what running speed was to you back then because I feel like a lot of us, myself included, get hung up on like the 10-minute mile. Like that's
Mhm.
somehow the threshold between fast and slow, even though it's
Mhm.
completely arbitrary and means nothing.
Right.
So I'd be curious if we could go back if that was like what in your mind you said as running speed. Because especially on a treadmill, it feels so much harder than running 10
I
minute pace
know.
outside.
Even now I feel like I run way slower on the treadmill, and which you think it would be the opposite because it's, climate controlled, it's
Hmm.
completely flat, but I'm like, I feel like it's so much harder to run slower even. Like I'm
Hmm.
running a slower pace, but it feels harder than if I was running faster outside. So that I feel like that will never make sense to me, but
Me neither, but it is definitely a thing.
yeah.
Um, okay, I had another question and it has escaped my mind. So let's let's go back to the time it stuck. Oh, I remember now. Okay, so you mentioned when you ran outside and
Uh-huh.
then you said, "Okay, I'm a runner now," and you started
Yeah.
investing in the gear.
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was like to like flip that switch? Because I know a lot of people get really hung up on labeling themselves as a runner until they like hit certain points.
Mhm.
So I'm curious how your mindset was about that.
I feel like in my mind I knew that it was something that I wanted to keep doing. So even if I couldn't run very far at the time, I knew like it was something where I wanted to invest my time. So even if I wasn't running that far now, I think at that time I was running, it was, 3 minutes, 5 minutes at a time. I knew that eventually I'd be running a 5K and hopefully longer. At that time, my ultimate goal was a half marathon.
Nice.
And so I was like, yeah, maybe I'm not running a lot now, but I'm gonna get there. So I think that it was less about the label as a runner and just kind of committing to, okay, this is something that I'm gonna do now and commit to and work hard on. So I feel like it wasn't that mentally calling myself a runner wasn't that hard of a switch because I was really excited about it and really enjoyed it, and so it was pretty easy for me, I would say.
I love that. It's more like for you, it sounds more like r- being a runner is less about what you're actually doing and more about like how you feel about running and your excitement for it.
Yeah, because especially in the beginning, I mean, when you start Couch to 5K, you are doing more walking than running, but you are still running and you're working
Hmm.
up to running more. And I think and all runners can agree that we all have times where we need to walk.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it wasn't a run, but yeah. So I think that's something that I've always been okay with because it makes it so that I can, go farther and just
Hmm.
I guess just being kind with whatever it takes for me to keep running, the whatever adjustments I need to make, then we'll do that.
Yeah. And clearly it paid off because now here we are, 2023. You've done
Oh my
so much
gosh.
running in between then and now.
Yeah, I
So,
have.
yeah. When was your first 5K? Was that in like, was that September-ish?
No, well, okay, so I went back to Couch to 5K in June, like early June 2020, but I jumped into week 4,
Mm-hmm.
back into week 4, so I don't know why I did that. I probably shouldn't have, but it was also just me being stubborn, I think. So I ended up finishing it around it sometime in July, and yeah, and we actually had um we were staying up in Big Bear in a cabin for the week. So I ran my first 5K at elevation, which is so funny. I don't know why. At the time that I didn't think about how that wasn't the best option, but it ended up being fine. I mean, I didn't feel the elevation as much as I have in other places like Utah where it's where it's also high elevation. So it
Hmm.
ended up working out. But if I could go back, I probably would choose a place that was more flat. And sea level, but it ended up working out, and it was a gorgeous course because it was still during COVID, so there were no 5K races. So my
Mm.
first 5K and 10K were just me running on the streets.
Oh,
They weren't an organized race.
that's awesome though. I feel like that's, I don't want to say more impressive, but I feel like that's just a testament to your commitment to it that you still like didn't have an organized race and yet you were like, I'm doing this. I'm going to do the thing.
Yeah, yeah, it was really fun, and yeah, but then it also made it really fun once I could actually run an organized race. It was really exciting. So um, that that was something that didn't happen until 2021. But once that could actually happen, it was really exciting.
And was that first organized race, was that another 5K or was that a half?
It was a half, and it almost didn't. It was kind of like up to a few weeks before we didn't even know if it was going to happen because it was kind of, so it was in March 2021. So it was kind of, it was obviously still, it was only a year into COVID, but it was at the time where a lot of people were starting to get vaccinated, and
Mhm.
things were lifting more. But they they kept sending out alerts like, we're pretty sure this is going to happen, but we're not 100% sure. And it was just so frustrating because I was like, I'm training for this my first half marathon, and I'm traveling to it. It was the Saguaro half marathon in Tucson, Arizona, with vacation races. Yeah, it was, it was really fun. It did end up happening. They just had to split it into 2 days, so it was less people, and they staggered the start.
Mhm.
So you started with like a group of maybe 20 people, and so it was really it was they were able to make it work with the because I think there were just restrictions with that county, but that was a hard first half marathon because the first half of it was on trail, and then the second half was rolling hills.
Oh my God.
So I don't know. Sometimes the choices I make with my first races, it's like I'm just gonna pick the hardest one. I'm like, why did I do that to myself? But it was a beautiful course. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend that one to someone for if it's their first half marathon.
How do you remember how you chose that race?
Yes, so I actually because I knew I wanted to do a vacation race because I love the national parks, and I
Mhm.
had always seen ads about the Zion half marathon, which I believe is the month before, but I had as I was training for the half marathon, I was having some issues with my IT band, and I fell behind in my training a lot, and I just was like, and also they had to move that location of the race, the Zion, they had to move it to a full trail race because normally it would be in town, but they couldn't do it with COVID restrictions. So it ended up just making sense to just push it to the next vacation race, which was a month later. So that was the only reason I picked it, because the timing worked out well where I could take some time to work on recovering my IT band, but it would still be at a national park that was, within driving distance. So that's the only reason I picked it. But it ended up being really fun, just really challenging. And it was the
I
first
bet.
year they ever had it. So
Oh.
they've made some improvements to it. They actually ended up flipping the course because the the first half of the first half of the race is on a lot of it's on single track trail, but it was a lot more congested because it was the beginning of the race. So it was, you kind of felt like if you were running and someone was faster behind you, you kind of had to jump off trail and let them go. So they made it so the road part is first. So by the time you get to the trail, it's more spread out. But yeah, for me, it was it was definitely an adventure. I will say that.
And clearly, you had such a good time that you wanted to keep doing longer races.
Yeah, I did. So, um, 2021 was definitely I did another half marathon, but it felt like the year where everything went wrong. Like I just had a lot of issues with my IT band, and But somehow, despite that, towards the end of the year, I was like, yeah, I have been, I figured out how to, not be injured anymore. And, I'm just going to skip from the half marathon to a 50K. And yeah, so I was like, I don't really have the desire to run a road marathon, at least not at this point, but a 50K seems like fun.
Yeah, and anyone who knows me knows I think the exact same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about road marathons that has never appealed to me. So, as you know, I also skipped from
Mhm.
half marathon to
Yeah.
50K. So you chose Zion as your first
Yes.
50K. Was that also
Yes.
because of vacation races and just looking at their selection?
Yeah, and I think I because I really liked the race that they put on, and it looked like a beautiful race, and it just seemed like a fun event. So I had been looking at it for a while, and my thought was I'll see. I'm gonna do some trail runs for the last couple months of the year and see how it goes, and then at the end of the year I'll sign up. But then I kind of was thinking, what if it sells out and I
Mm.
don't get the chance to get it? So I was like, I'm just gonna sign up, and I can, transfer my race if I need to. And so I ended up signing up, and I think a week later it sold out.
Oh
So
my God.
I felt like it was meant to be.
Yeah, definitely good timing.
Yeah.
Um, and then that's when we met.
Yeah, and I was thinking I haven't told you the story about my journey to find a coach because it was
Oh,
really
yeah.
hard.
Tell me about
So,
it.
yeah, so I knew that I wanted to have a coach for training for my ultra marathon just because it was such a big thing for me. So, kind of towards the end of 2021, I was starting to look, and I talked to two coaches before I met you, and they both were really hesitant to train me because I hadn't run a road marathon before. And
Oh.
I know, and I appreciate them, sticking to their convictions as a coach, because I feel like they could easily be like, "Oh, this girl, she's not gonna be able to do it, but I like want another client."
Mhm.
So I appreciate them, staying true to what they believe as a coach, but I was also just so frustrated because I knew that I could do it, and I didn't want to have to beg someone to
Mhm.
train me and be my coach. I wanted to find someone that was excited about what I wanted to do, and that believed in me and was excited for it. And then I found you on TikTok. And I think it was something about how you went from a half marathon to an ultra. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. And then I reached out to you, and then we were a good match. So, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. Oh my God, I never knew that. That's so
I know. I
funny.
was like, I haven't told her about that story. And what was frustrating too was I think I started looking for a coach in November 2021, and we because I was like, I need to start training because this race is in March,
Mhm.
and I don't really know what I'm doing. And I couldn't, I couldn't find a coach that, worked well for me. And then by the time I found you and we started working together, I think it was like early. Oh no, sorry. My race was in April, and I think we started working together like end of January, early February. So I think I
Mhm.
only had like 10 weeks.
Yeah,
And you're like, "Yeah, like let's do it. Let's get started." So we made it work
we did. You finished
cuz
it?
my goal was just to cross that finish line, and I did that.
Yeah, I feel like for a lot of first ultras, one, I feel like that should be your goal just to finish.
Yeah.
And I feel like with a lot of athletes, like even if you don't have as much time to train as the ideal, like depending on the cutoff times, a lot
Mhm.
of people can still complete it, as long as
Yeah.
they're like you and like totally okay with walking when needed and like
Mhm.
having that expectation that we're just going to try to finish and do everything
Yeah.
we can. So yeah, obviously worked out well for you.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Zion
Mhm.
because Zion is quite different than where you train. So, can you talk a little bit
Yes.
about getting to Zion? Because Zion is, what is it, 7,000 feet
I'm
elevation?
I'm not I don't remember.
I don't either,
But
but
it's
it's more
it's
than where you
quite a
are.
yes, I'm at sea level. I trained at sea level, so I do have a trail near my house, but it's not anywhere near the type of terrain that Zion is. It was definitely more technical. Um so I prepared as much as I could with where I was there, but I remember the night before doing my shakeout run, running really slow, and I was like, I'm pretty out of breath. This is a little concerning. This might be an issue, but we're just going to see how it goes.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that. It is, elevation is super hard, especially when you train at sea level.
Yeah.
Um, but if I remember correctly, the hardest part about Zion, and I'll let you speak to this,
Mhm.
was the slick rock, right?
Yes. Yes. So I think there was about maybe 6 miles of slick rock, which it it isn't actually slippery. It actually has good grip, but it's imagine you're running and it's just a bunch of big boulders, rocks that you're not following an actual trail, so you're kind of having to climb up and down these rocks, and then there's not like a really organized path because it's not a trail. So they have the trail markers, the pink ribbons that you're following, but I felt like so much of my mental energy was just looking for where I'm supposed to go. So
Mhm.
that was definitely hard. I also fell on the slick rocks. I don't know if I ever told you that, but I I fell like on my whole side, ripped my leggings,
Oh my god.
and that kind of shook me up a little bit, but I was fine, but I just yeah, and there was like no one around when I fell, and I was like it made me less confident because
Hmm.
I was kind of, running across the rocks, and then I felt like I had to be more careful. So that was definitely the hardest part, and it was also the longest distance between aid stations. So uh I feel like that was when I was kind of the mentally definitely the hardest part of that race.
And where in the race did that occur? Like mile wise?
It it was I it started it started at mile 6, and it wasn't the whole time, but it was big patches of it, I would say between miles 6 and 17.
Mm.
So not the whole time, but probably I would guess around like maybe 6 miles of it.
Yeah,
So it
that's a
was a
lot.
lot.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Slick rock is hard, especially it's like nice when it's smooth, but then when there's all these divots in it, I'm just like, I'm gonna break my ankle in one of
Yeah.
these.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, it was and I remember there was one point where I had to actually climb up one of them, and I was like, this is a running race. I should not be having to do rock climbing. I was not prepared for this,
Was that
but
one of the pictures you sent us after the fact?
I think so.
I
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah. Yeah, very rude in the middle of a running race.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Um, do you remember, or can you describe how you felt finishing your first ultra?
Oh my gosh, it was so emotional. I mean, it was obviously I had just done this. I'd been, on my feet for 10 hours. The last loop of the race is has a lot of gain, and it was really hard. Like miles 27 or 26 to 29 were really hard, with a lot of gain. So I was really tired, um, physically, emotionally. So I remember when I turned down the kind of like the path where you finish, I could feel myself wanting to start crying, but then I was like, no, I'm still running and I need to be able to breathe. And I'm like, hold it together, keep yourself together. And then once I crossed the finish line, I just started crying because I was just, and I don't know why. I think it was, I mean, it was just a mix of a lot of feelings, like being really proud of this thing I'd accomplished, really tired.
Mhm.
But mostly I just felt really accomplished and excited.
Yeah, I cried at my first one too, so
Yeah. I feel
getting
like
to the
that's pretty
finish.
common.
Yeah, you've been on trail for so long and then you finally like hear people at the end or see the finish and
Yeah.
you're just like, "Oh my God, I'm doing this."
Yeah, especially with Zion, I was alone for a
Mm,
lot of it, and because I was definitely like towards the of back of the pack, so there weren't a lot of I wouldn't cross paths with people a lot, and it was so I was by myself a lot, and I didn't listen to music the whole time because I know because I my thought was I'm going to wait until I really need it. And
mm.
then I think around mile 20, I thought, okay, I need it. So I tried listening to music and I had downloaded podcasts or music, I think, on Spotify, and nothing was playing. Like nothing would work. So I'm like, okay, guess it's just me and my thoughts for the rest of this.
Oh
So
my God.
yeah, so I think I was just kind of, I had been alone for so long, and then yeah, you start to hear like the music. It's like mm, mm. And then you know that it's, you're almost there. So that was, yeah, that was definitely a really really exciting day.
Yeah, and I'm gonna link your TikTok video from that finish because it's still it's so emotional.
I know.
It's my favorite TikTok you've ever made.
Oh.
Um, how does finishing or how did finishing your first ultra compare to finishing your first either 5K or your first official sanctioned race?
Um, it definitely felt like a definitely more emotional, and it felt like a bigger it definitely it felt like more final, I would say, because it 50K, I mean, we'll get into this later. I did end up running longer, but it kind of felt like that's kind of the max distance I'm going to ever run
Mhm.
versus a half marathon. Like, oh, I'll probably do this again, maybe I'll run longer, but I was like, wow, I've met this really big physical goal that a lot of people thought I was crazy for doing in the first place. And but yeah, it was I think it just felt like a bigger accomplishment, and kind of like I've hit my peak almost. But it was, yeah, it felt, both were really exciting, but it this one just, I think it meant more to me.
Yeah, I could see that. And then what about that experience made you be like, I want to do this again?
Well, I would say that I definitely didn't feel the need to do it again right away. I think I knew that I would run an ultra again, but I knew the kind of things that I was looking for in a race. So, I needed one that I some ultras have pretty strict time cutoffs that can be hard depending on how fast you're running. And I was like, I don't want to run a race where I feel like I'm going to be afraid the whole time that I'm not going to meet the time cutoff.
Mhm.
Um, so I was like, I want to run an ultra again, but I'll just need to wait for the to find the right one. And I also wanted to work on my speed more, so that's what we kind of did for the rest of last year, was working on my half marathon and my 5K time. So it's like I'm going to do an ultra again, but I'm going to kind of put it on the shelf for a little bit and work on these other things for a while.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about working on your speed in a bit, but
Mhm.
let's just continue with this ultra train.
Yeah.
So, the ultra you decided to do was a 12-hour race.
Yes.
And how did you decide on that one? And what about the 12-hour format appeal to you versus a distance-based race?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things I loved about Zion was the journey of it, like kind of the different sections. But one of the things that stressed me out about just, I guess, races in general, but more so ultras, was being afraid that I was going to need something and I wouldn't have access to it. So, like food, water, restroom. So, when I heard about a 12-hour race and they're pretty much looped, usually looped courses that the loops aren't that long. The one I did specifically was 2 miles. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm only going to be 2 miles away from everything I need at all times. That sounds awesome. So that was and I think just the idea of knowing that the mental part of a 12-hour race where you can kind of always say, okay, I can do 2 more miles, 2 more miles, um, just to kind of see what I could do. It just really fascinated me with the different possibilities of how it could go. So I found a 50K I was interested in, and then I found the race I ended up doing, and I was kind of debating, but I just couldn't get the 12-hour race out of my mind. And I was like, I'm just gonna go for that one.
Yeah, that's usually a sign when you can't stop
Yeah.
thinking about it.
Yeah.
um, so the 12-hour race, what was that? 3 weekends ago at this point? 2 weekends ago?
Yeah. Three
Oh
three
my
weeks.
God. I can't believe it's been so long already.
I know.
It's crazy. So going into the 12-hour race, I guess you had set a goal and I had supported the goal to hit 40 miles.
hmm
Um, so how can you talk about how you were feeling going into the race? And then let's just kind of like walk through the race. Because I
Yeah.
know you had some low points on this one for various
Yes.
reasons.
Yes. So, um, going into the race, I felt good. Um, I didn't train really so the course I was going to be running was kind of like a dirt road that had some gain, but not too much. So I had been training on the road, and just because I felt like it wasn't traily enough to do trail runs. So
Hmm.
my training went really well. I had some really positive long runs. So I felt really good going into it. And you had sent me that the spreadsheet. I call you the spreadsheet queen. Just with all of the kind of pace estimates and just seeing like, oh, I could if I can go pretty slow and still meet the 40 miles
Hmm.
even with taking breaks and stuff. So I felt really good about it going into the race. I felt like I was trained well for it, and I had time, and was like, if things go well, I'll probably get somewhere in the mid 40s, but if things don't go well, I can still probably hit 40 unless something really unheard of happens.
Hmm. Shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for anyone curious, the
Mhm.
spreadsheet we made was basically like what pace would Mac have to hit to do 40 miles and like kind of assuming as the race went on, pace would get slower. So that's basically what we had. And it was so cute. Puya in the middle
Mhm.
sent me a video. He's like, she's right on pace. She's doing great.
I know, he was so sweet.
He's the best. So the day you before the race, when you got
Mhm.
there, it
Yes.
was that when it was raining or did it rain overnight?
It wasn't raining yet. So, oh, and I should explain how kind of this race specifically is set up.
Oh
It's
yes.
it's at a vineyard, and it's a 2 mile loop, and they had a bunch of different distances, or I guess times. They had 24-hour, 12-hour, and 6 hour, and then they also had 100 miler. So there are people doing a lot of different distances. And for the 12-hour, you had the option to start at either 6 p.m. and run to 6 a.m., or you could start 6 a.m. and then run, through the day to 6 p.m. So I thought, well, of course I'm going to run at 6 a.m. Like, why would I want to run overnight? And then you also had the option to camp along the route, like along the loop. But I thought, of course I'm gonna get a hotel. I don't want to. It's already hard enough to sleep the night before a race. Like, I don't want to be sleeping in a tent. I want to be in my warm bed.
Hmm.
So come to find out that a majority of the 12-hour race people did run overnight. I was in the minority there. And I feel like I was the only one who stayed in a hotel, which was just so odd to me. So I feel like I kind of had the bougie experience, but everyone had like everyone could have started at 6 a.m. But yeah, so that's kind of what we were working with. And so the start time of the race was 6 p.m. the day before I started, and that's when most of the 12-hour people started, all the 24-hour and all the 100-miler people started. So we got there, I think around 3 and got my bib. And then we did, instead of doing a shakeout run, I just did a walk of the course. So just walking the 2 mile loop to see, just to kind of get a feel for it. And something funny during that loop is some nearby cows got out of their their farm. They went through the fence, so we turned a corner and there was just a bull just on the course, and it had these big horns, and we're like, what are we supposed to do? So we just ended up walking through some of the vineyards because the bull couldn't get in there because of its horns. But that was funny. The cow and a few cows got out, so they had to get them in back to where they were supposed to go before the race started. But yeah, so it's 5:45 p.m. and the most of the runners are going to start. So we thought, okay, we'll watch the start and kind of see the first people come in for their loop just to see kind of how it goes, like just so we could see it and be prepared for tomorrow. And by this point, it's very windy and starting to rain. So it was really cold. And I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot imagine running, like starting to run right now. Um, so we watched all the runners take off, watch them come through, and then we're like, all right, bye guys, we're gonna go to our hotel and sleep in our bed. So and when we were that night, we just heard the rain all night.
Oh my god, all
And
night?
we heard different things. Like some people said it rained all night. Some people said it rained for 4 hours. We heard the rain a lot. So I'm not sure exactly how much it rained, but it was a lot of rain. So, and it was cold when we were out there. So I'm sure they were pretty cold. And then, so we get there the next morning, and well, when I had walked the course, I thought, okay, I'm just gonna wear my normal long run shoes. I'm not gonna wear trail shoes. But then we open the car door and it's just mud. I was like, oh my gosh, no. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna start with my trail shoes and then we'll see how it goes. So I change into my trail shoes, and we start at 6 a.m. and a quarter mile into the course, it's just deep mud.
Ugh.
Like, oh my goodness. This is going to be a wild ride. And so the whole entire course wasn't that muddy, but I would say maybe about a a quarter of it or a third of it had pretty significant amount of mud.
Oof, that's quite a bit for a 2 mile loop.
I know. Yeah, there was one section that was particularly bad that just no one could run it. Everyone was kind of walking and trying to make sure they placed their steps correctly so they wouldn't slip. And but it was, yeah, that was very very unexpected. I was not prepared for that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing pictures of your shoes and the bottom of your pants from the mud.
I
Um,
know.
yeah, if anyone
Yeah.
is curious, you have many TikToks from in the middle of the race
Yes.
at the end of the race.
Yes. Yeah, but there was just no way to avoid getting wet feet. It was just something I was like, okay, I'm just gonna have to accept this as part of the experience. And yeah, so that's how the race started. It was, and luckily I only had to do one lap in the dark because then the sun came up, which that's why I chose the 6 a.m. start. Just made the most sense to me. because I'm like, I'm already going to be tired running 12 hours. Why
Mhm.
throw an extra an extra stressor in there?
Yeah, sleep
But
deprivation, no
I
thanks.
know, I know. That's and I don't do well when I'm not good at powering through sleep deprivation. I know some people are, but I'm definitely not.
It's rough. Um,
Yeah.
so how did this ultra compare to Zion?
It was it was better in some ways, harder in other ways. So I think that the obviously it was really nice having everything I needed 2 miles from me at all times. I never had to worry about like when I needed to go to the restroom, like when I didn't even have to carry a I didn't carry a hydration pack with me. I just would have water every time I came in to the aid station, and Puya would give me food, and they had really good aid station food too, which vacation races did too. But
Mhm.
one thing I loved about Zion was just the journey of it, the different sites, um, the different sites you'd see, and you never know what's going to be around the corner. Um, with this, I was like, I feel like I know every corner of this winery now. Like they had different labels of what where the different grapes were, and I was like, oh yeah, like when I it was really muddy over by the Petite Syrah. It's like I know where all the grapes are being grown now because I've been running past them for 12 hours. So there were pros and cons to both. Um, but yeah, so I can't say that one was better than the other, but they're just different, very different.
Yeah, definitely apples and oranges as races go.
Yeah, yeah.
How was it mentally running a 2 mile loop for 12 hours?
It was harder than I thought. It was, and I think what maybe was harder than the 2 mile loop was just knowing how long I would be running. So
Mm.
with Zion, I didn't know exactly when I would finish, or I wasn't thinking like, I'm going to be running for 10 hours. It's like, that's kind of something I looked back on. Wow, I ran for 10 hours. But this, I remember in a moment, this is kind of where I probably started hitting my low point is I looked down at my watch. I was already starting to feel tired, or my legs were, feeling tired. And I looked down at my watch and saw that it was 9 a.m. So I'd been running for 3 hours. So obviously your legs are going to start to get tired. They weren't, as tired as they would be at the end. But I thought, oh my gosh, I have a long way to go. I'm going to be running for 9 more hours. And I feel like my brain was just like, what, like you've already been running for 3 hours and you're already getting tired. How are you going to do 9 more hours? So I think probably miles 12 to 18 were my lowest point, which was happened a lot earlier than I expected. I thought maybe towards the end I would be um a lot a lot more down, but once I hit I once I got to the second half of the race, I felt like I could approach it in more uh I could approach it in more digestible chunks. So
Mm.
because my first goal was kind of getting to 20 miles. So once I got to 18, I was like, okay, one more lap, 20 miles. And then once I hit 20 miles, it was three more laps until the marathon. And then, one and a half more laps until the 50K. And then once I got to 32 miles, it was kind of then the countdown to 40.
Mhm.
So that's why once I hit 20 miles, I feel like I was in a much better headspace.
So, how did you get through miles 12 through 18 when it was harder than you expected?
I mean, I I feel like just putting one foot in front of the other, just keep, physically is like I know I can keep going, so I'm just going to keep moving forward. And then I did talk to, this is probably one thing that helped me get out of that funk, which probably isn't very helpful, but I talked to this guy who was doing the 100 miler briefly, and he's like, I'm on mile 56. And I was like, at least I'm not that guy. It's like, I'm on mile 15. Like, I can do this. Like, he's already gone way farther than I'm going to go in the whole race. So, that helped me just which is probably not super helpful, but it's like at least I'm not running 100 miles. I'm only running 40. um and then just thinking about how it makes sense that I feel this way. It's like I no one goes into an ultra marathon thinking that they're going to feel good the whole time or even most of the time. I just had to remind myself like, this is normal
Mhm.
and you're okay. You're going to make it through this. You just got to keep going, and a lot of times mental with the mental barriers in an ultra, a lot of times it gets better.
Mhm.
So you'll hit a low point, but then you'll come back from it. So I think just from thinking to myself, okay, I've been through this. I've been through an ultra before. I've been through low moments, and I did eventually come back and feel better. So just reminding myself that this is just temporary, and this day will eventually end, even though it doesn't feel like it at the moment, but it will.
I think that'll be very helpful for a lot of people to hear, especially
Hmm.
going into an ultra. That does
Yeah.
bring up a question. As we've alluded, you did work on your speed in between ultras. So you went for 5K and half marathon PRs. Um,
Yes.
and the low points for those shorter races are very different than low points for ultras.
Yes.
How did I guess comparing the two, how did the low points feel for the shorter races compared to the ultra? Because in the shorter races, well, half marathon, this might work. The like, this is
Hmm.
temporary, just keep moving forward, you can do this. But like in a 5K, it's like,
Yeah.
it's
It's just
temporary, but
pain
it's
the
gonna
whole
hurt for a
time.
while. Yeah.
Yeah. 5K, it's like you're the whole thing is a low point. Just kidding. But it's a short amount of time.
It's
Yeah.
true. They're so
Yeah, I think
painful.
it's I think they're just so different. I think that with ultra it's like you're going a lot slower, and the 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 pain that you're feeling is, I mean, it's physical, but it feels like the real challenge is mental versus the shorter distances. Again, it is physical and mental, but you're fighting a lot more with your physical ability. At least that's what it feels like for me. Like trying to, it's like you're redlining, with the 5K versus, my for the ultra, my at least for me, I was going slow because, I could try not to fall in the mud, and so it's like my heart rate is pretty low the whole time, so that's not an issue, but I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to have to be on my feet for the next 12 hours.
Mhm.
How can I mentally wrap my head around that?" That's really hard.
Yeah. Which do you find to be harder?
I've gone back and forth. I feel like whichever one I'm doing feels harder. Because I remember when I last year when I did a mile time or sorry, a 5K time trial, afterwards I said that's way harder than an ultra. But I think in reality ultras are harder, just because of the time length. Yeah, I think for me personally ultras are harder because I think mentally with a 5K you just know it's going to be done so fast,
Mhm.
but with the ultra, even if you're running faster, it's not going to be done fast.
That's true, especially in a 12-hour race. You're out there
Yeah.
whether you want to be or not
Yeah,
for
as
12 hours.
the however fast or slow you're running, it's still going to be 12 hours.
Yeah, that I struggle a lot with like time-based training because of that cuz it's like
Mhm.
doesn't matter what speed
Yeah.
I'm running, I'm going to be out
Yeah.
here for however long regardless, and on certain days that just feels so hard.
Mhm.
So hard.
Totally.
um let's see. Is there anything from the 12-hour race that you learned about yourself that you maybe not didn't know before, but like that came to the forefront from the race?
That's a good question. I think I wouldn't say particularly that I learned about myself, but I think it just reminded myself that I can persevere and do things that are challenging. This and I mean, a 12-hour race is hard enough on its own, but there were a lot of unexpected things that made it harder as well. So I think that um, I was I learned, or I was able to see that I can be resilient and I can adapt to changes in races, which I know is something you talk about a lot too. We can't control what we're gonna face on race day with our own body or with the conditions. We just kind of
Mhm.
have to be ready to approach whatever we can. So I feel like that was a good test of just my ability to work hard with what I was given that day. And I was able to do 40 miles and 40 miles exactly, which was really exciting. Um, it almost felt like my body let me do 40 miles and then it was like we're done.
It's funny how that happens when you have like the idea of how hard you can push, and then your body's like,
hmm
okay, that's what we're doing and nothing more.
I know, it was so weird. It really felt that way because when I was in this race, if you came in with and there was 14 minutes left on the count, or on the 14 minutes or more left on the clock, you could go for another lap even if you were going to go, if it meant you would go above 12 hours. And I think I came in, I was gonna come in at around 18 minutes left. So I was on mile 39 and I was saying like, "Oh, I'm gonna say this is my last lap, but I think that I can squeeze in one more lap."
Mhm.
And then I hit, or that was mile 38. Then I hit mile 39 and I was like, we'll see. And then mile 39 and a half, I was like, we're done. Like I just knew my body was telling me I was done. My feet hurt really bad. I could barely run at that point. I was kind of
Mhm.
just shuffling. I mean, you saw my finish line video. That was like my sprint finish, whereas I was kind of just shuffling. But I thought, it just felt like my body said, okay, we're going to get you to exactly 40 miles and then you'll be good. So I ended up stopping at, I think it was 11 hours and 42 minutes, I believe. So, and there were only two other people left on the course.
Oh my
So
gosh.
a lot of people dropped out. That's when all the 24-hour people were supposed to finish too. And there were no 24-hour people left on the course. That's
That's
how,
wild.
I know, it was really intense. That mud just really, really put people through it.
I can imagine, especially if you had started at 6 p.m. the night before and then
Yeah,
run
I
with
can.
the rain and the mud. Oh,
Yeah, I cannot imagine that.
no,
Yeah.
but you did it. You accomplished your goal.
I did. I did.
um, how did that finish feel compared to all of your other finishes?
Okay, I would say compared, because I was wondering if I was going to be emotional like I was with my first ultra and it felt completely different. I just felt way more relief at this finish line because I just felt at so many points throughout the day that this day is never going to end. And then crossing the finish line, I was like, the day has ended. And it was really, since I was one of the last people on the course, all the race workers were, because I had texted Puya and told him, because he knew that I might do another lap, and I told him like this is it. I'm gonna come in for my finish. And so he told all the aid station workers, which they all loved him, by the way, because he was always around. But he told them all, and so they were all cheering me on as I came in, and the race director came and put on my medal. So it was a really fun experience. It just felt more intimate and small. It was kind of like friends cheering me on, and the feeling was just more um excited to be done versus excited that I did it. Not that I wasn't excited that I did it. I was just so tired by the
Mhm.
end.
Yeah, I can imagine. Um, and now you're shifting gears again. going back to
Yes.
speed.
Yeah.
Um, okay, let's touch briefly on your speed training.
hmm
What fueled that desire to go from the ultra training back to speed? Because they are quite different.
Yeah. Well, I, it's funny because when I was, you know how like when you run an ultra, like while you're running it, you think, why did I do this? Like,
Mhm.
why did I decide to do this? And, but then sometimes once you finish, then that night you're already looking up your next ultra. I definitely did not have that experience this time. I was just like, okay, I'm happy that I did it, but I'm ready for something new. And I had a lot of fun doing speed work and training for my PRs in the fall and winter, which is what I did like for the end of 2022. So I wanted to work on that again. And it's just been really fun uh seeing the improvements in that way and kind of have starting from slower speeds. I feel like I have a lot of room that I can improve, which is really fun. So um obviously the faster you get, you don't have those crazy big PRs anymore, but that was something that was really fun about last year was just having these big big moments where it's like, I just had a 22-minute PR on my half marathon. It's like, I know that that's not going to be, that's not something I should expect from every race because the faster you get, the harder it is to do things like that. But that's been something fun about starting off slow is seeing those big changes. So I'm just excited to see what I can do, just switch it up. I think it's fun to have like a big long race, at least once a year. But yeah, I'm just excited to work on seeing if I can get a little faster.
Yeah, and I realized the way I said that it might sound like we don't do speed work for ultras, so
Yeah,
just want to mention we do speed work.
yeah,
But now speed being the focus is a little
yeah.
different
The
training
like
wise.
more 5K specific. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, more of that is the focus versus like really big long runs on the weekend or back to
yeah,
backs.
right.
Um, yeah, and I just want to echo everything you said. Like, it was so exciting the end of last year. Like, you're like 3 5Ks in a row where it's like, this one's faster, this one's faster. Just like seeing your growth. So I think that's also just a really cool part of running, especially
Yeah.
when you haven't like done focused training in that area before. Like you're saying, you
hmm
don't know where your limit is, and it's really exciting seeing how you can improve and how quickly.
It's been really fun and yeah, I don't know exactly how far I'll get this year, but that's the fun of it. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and every year you get more tools in your tool belt to use in
Yeah.
races, whether it's short or
Mhm.
long. Um, so, question about ultras.
Mhm.
At this moment in time, do you have any desire to run farther than 40 miles?
Um n- I don't think in the near future. I The one thing that's cool about ultras is seeing how people will do ultras like later in their life too. I feel like the two ultras I've done, I've been on the younger side. A lot of people are older. So I think that, or older than me, I should say. And so I think it's cool to know that there's no rush to add on, that time that's something I can do in my, 40s, 50s, hopefully, as long as, everything, as long as I can, I would love
Mm-hmm.
to keep doing those races. So, at the moment, I don't have the desire to go farther, but I'm kind of thinking like maybe later on in my life I will. I would like to do another 50K at some point. I feel like it's a good distance. It's enough of an ultra where, you're pushing yourself a lot, but it's not too intense training wise. So I could see myself doing another 50K maybe next year, but I don't see myself doing anything longer in the near future. But watch me do that next year and just be like, I know I said this, but I signed up for a 50 miler. Feel like
Yeah.
I do that a lot. Like, I will never do this kind of race. I'm like, oh, so I signed up for it.
I think we all do. I mean,
Yeah.
I said I'm not, never going to run a 50 miler, and this year, apparently I am.
I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, I'm still haven't been thinking about it, but we got time. Um, I want to ask you really quick some TikTok questions.
Okay.
So you have been very open with your journey. I
Hmm.
didn't see the beginning of it because I didn't find you on TikTok yet, but I know that you've dealt a little bit with the haters
Yeah.
telling you that you're slow.
Yeah.
um, how has that journey been? Just like dealing with you have quite a reach on a lot of your TikToks. So like how has that been just having unsolicited opinions on, something that means so much to you that you're choosing to share with the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like knowing myself, I would expect to care more because I can be kind of sensitive, and especially with something that you care a lot about, you you're more protective of it, and you don't want people to criticize it. But honestly, I mean, sometimes I would say it more bugs me than it does hurt my feelings because I I I'm not like I'm out here saying like I'm the fastest runner, and then people are like, no, you're actually slow. Like, I know that I'm not fast, especially when I'm doing my easy runs. That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want people to see that you don't have to be fast to be a runner, and that is something that if I would have known earlier in my journey, I probably would have started running sooner. So I I can take some annoying comments, and I feel like they're mostly teenage boys, which
Mm.
is, whatever.
Yeah.
But I can take it if knowing that hopefully it can inspire someone to run even if they're slower. A lot of people feel like, "Oh, I would run. I can't run 10-minute miles, so I thought like maybe it's not even worth running." And it's like, no, you can run
Mm-hmm.
way slower than that and still be a runner. And so yeah, I think that I it's been I receive a lot more support than I do mean comments, which is good. I feel like if it was all mean, then maybe I couldn't handle it.
Yeah, that's fair. I've never actually seen the mean comments, but I do like
Mhm.
when you clap back with another TikTok making fun of them. Those are always funny.
Yeah,
Um,
someone told me this. I There was this one person that told me like it's unless it's like a 9:30 pace or faster, then it's walking. I was like, that's just not. It's just so ridiculous that it's not even something that I would take into consideration. It-
yeah, if that were true, a lot of us are out here walking.
yeah, yeah,
Like half my runs are walking then.
yeah. Right.
I I always wonder why people feel the need to write stuff like that, especially something that's blatantly not true. It's like,
I know.
what's the point of this? You're just
I
like
don't
trying
get
to
it.
tear someone down. Yeah.
I know. I know.
Especially when your content is so uplifting and positive most of the time.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, and sometimes it's yeah, I really feel like I don't get it as much anymore. I feel like there was definitely a period of time where I got it more, but I haven't gotten it in a while. But yeah,
Good.
I think that it's whatever. Just try not to let it bother me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it.
Mhm.
And if anyone goes to like any of your TikToks, they can just see all the people that you are inspiring and helping and just are there to support you.
Yeah, my followers are really really great. So there's a good community on Run Talk.
Yeah, Run Talk is the best.
Yeah.
Okay, last question for you.
Hmm.
Now that it's been, what is this? Is it March still? Yeah, I guess it's been almost 3 years since running has officially stuck for you. So,
Mhm.
why do you keep running?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say, um, I'd probably say a few things. One, I've always enjoyed, movement in some form. I used to dance, I've played other sports, so I think that I like having some way to move my body, and running is, I think, has just been something that a way that I've really enjoyed doing that in the past couple years. And another thing is I've always been a slightly competitive person, but also never like super great at any of the sports that I've done. So that's been that always kind of bugged me. But with running, it's fun because I can be competitive against myself. So like obviously I'm not going out there winning any 5K races, ultramarathons, but I I'm competitive more against myself. So maybe I'll be trying to get faster or, just working on myself. So I think that that is another reason that I stick with running. And then I also just um, proving to myself that it's just something I've wanted to do for so long. And now that I can do it, it makes me really happy.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think this
Yeah.
will be a great listen for a lot of people. And if people want to follow along with your journey, where can they find you?
They can find me on TikTok at Mackedy, so Mackedy. I'm also Mackedy on Instagram. I don't really post my running stuff on there, but I might start because who knows what's going on with TikTok.
Fair.
So you can follow me there too, and yeah, that's where you can find me.
And YouTube.
Oh yeah, and YouTube. I think on there, yeah, I'm Mackety there as well. So I'm working on posting all of my old TikToks as reels. No,
Shorts.
shorts. I get them mixed up. Shorts. And then I do have a vlog from Zion when I ran that. So
Oh,
that's the
yeah.
only long video that I have, but I'm thinking about maybe starting to post more long form content on there. So yeah, you can find me at Mackety there as well.
Perfect. And I'll link all of those. But thanks for coming back. This was so fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course.